Rural business trends. These are some things that are changing in small towns. Because we have a lot of people in small towns who act like nothing will ever change. People who talk about, I remember when I was a kid, we had 3 theaters and 2 menswear stores and a grocery and 14 saloons downtown. That's the one my mom always tells me about. Now, how she knows we had 14 saloons, I don't know. The main street may be a big flea market. Things have changed a lot over our lifetimes, even if you're fairly young. I look down at the young group in the room here. Even if you're young, you've seen change in your lifetime. But we all kind of remember what town used to be like when we were kids. And it's different now. But we tend to look at the town not as what is it going to become, but we're still looking at it from that frame of reference of what did it used to be. So how can we change our perspective of looking more into the future? So that is where I use the trends. I do say that we will have a future. Small towns have a future. Now, sometimes we get the impression from everything that we see or read says, like we're going to all leave small towns and move to big cities because urbanization, right? Like everybody has to go. No, we are going to need food. I am fairly certain. We will need small towns because over 90% of the land in the U.S., rural. Therefore, that's where most of the farming is going to continue to happen, no matter what advances happen for us. We will also need, shout out to my nephew here. There's my nephew. Okay. And then energy and natural resources. We know this. We know where all of that production happens. It's not in the big city. It's out in rural areas and small towns. And whether it's old style production, new style production, wind, solar, even our water supply comes from rural areas. And so it also matters about conservation. This is my other nephew, my little tiny nephew here, who's 6 feet tall now. I put a bunch of Oklahoma pictures in this, so it's full of my nephews now. So when I was in Wisconsin last week, it was full of Wisconsin photos. But I get to come home, I get to use all my own photos of Oklahoma. But we need conservation. We talked about the water supply. We need people who will protect and conserve our environment. And we want to be able to enjoy it. We want to be able to get out there. We know research shows we're healthier and happier when we get into nature. So this is one of our advantages of living in small towns. We're connected with nature, and we're the people who see to the conservation and see that we have opportunities to enjoy nature. So we have a future in that. And finally, we grow strong people. I just showed you the nephew with the little horse here. This is the little guy with the horse. This is Trevor. This is Trevor last year. Hey, he grew up. We grow strong people. We do. I just saw a headline in January in the New York Times that said, universities discover the rural student. Like it was a big secret. Like they didn't know that we're awesome. When you grow up in a small town, you are self-reliant, you have a deep sense of community, then all of these traits that we have gather in our upbringing make us strong, resilient people. And that's important. And that's an important reason we will continue to have small towns. But the question is, will every small town survive? No, not every small town is going to make it. So how do we make sure that our small town is one of the ones that does survive? What are the characteristics that we need to have to make sure we survive? And research says, from Iowa State University, they said it is openness to new ideas. This is really hard for small towns, but Iowa State University followed 99 of their small towns over a period of 20 years, including Webster City, Iowa, and found that those that were most open to new ideas had the best economic and demographic outcomes. In other words, they prospered and they kept their people because they were open to new ideas and allowed new people to take part meaningfully in the community. That's your number one characteristic. So how can we be more open to new ideas? Because it's not easy. Our human brains are wired to fear moving on from the way that we've always done things. We're comfortable doing it this way. How do we get past that? And Margie Worrell, who wrote the books Brave and Stop Playing Safe, said there's 4 ways our brains are wired to keep us from ever changing or taking a risk and starting a business or buying a business or going out on our own. So those 4 ways we fear change. We overestimate the possibility of something going wrong. We overestimate how likely that is. We overestimate how bad the consequences would be if something did go wrong. So we think it'll be the end of the world if something does happen. And then we underestimate our ability to deal with it. It'll be the end of the world and I'll never be able to handle it. This is the way our brains are wired. And finally, and maybe the most telling, we have programmed into our brains this absolute tendency to discount the risk of inaction or sticking with the status quo. If we just stayed the way things are, it'll be fine. That's what our brain thinks. So there's actually Professor Phil Bobbitt from the University of Texas calls this the Parmenides fallacy, because Parmenides was the Greek philosopher who said, all change is an illusion. The world is static. Professor Bobbitt said that when we have to make a decision, what we have to weigh is not the risk of the change we're considering versus how wonderful it is the way things are right now. We're comfortable the way things are now. What we have to weigh is the risk of that change we're weighing versus the risk of sitting still even as things change around us. Because they won't stay the same, we know that. So we can't compare the possible future to the current. We have to compare this possible future to a different possible future. And what is the risk of not taking action in a fast-moving world? Well, the famous Oklahoma philosopher Will Rogers said, you will get run over even if you're on the right track, if you're just sitting there. So that's the risk. So let's look at what's coming down the stream at us very quickly here. First is that we've reached the end of geographic limits. The lines on the map do not define your community anymore. You are not limited by where you're located, only serving a local market, only connecting with local information, because how many people in this room right now are using a device connected to the internet right this second? Let's count. 1, 2, who else is using? 3 that are open now. All right, how many of you have within arm's reach a device connected to the internet? Everybody in the room. In fact, we are connected at all times. We have the ability to connect with information. That's sad? No, I think it's great. She's enjoying herself.
She's going to run into a tree.
That's why she's on a horse. The horse is looking for trees. It's his job not to run into the tree. She's probably FaceTiming with somebody. Look, I'm on a horse. I think that's fine. My point, this could very easily have been my nephew Trevor, who was probably on a horse. I got to get a picture of him on his phone on the horse. I do have a picture of a gal in the parade on her phone on a horse as well. Okay, but the point is, we have information instantly accessible. I come from the 70s, the land of the paper encyclopedia. All gone, because that information is instantly available to all of us instantly now. We use that as getting us past geographic limits. We are no longer limited by where we're located. And you don't have to have organization. We don't need, that's my little nephews, there they are. That was the same day there. We were taking his senior pictures, and the reason that we're in the park is because of the play equipment. Well, Alva had some really old, unsafe play equipment. And there was a group of moms who said, we have old, unsafe equipment, we need to replace it. They decided they were going to take action on this. They started figuring out what was available. They started researching online because they had at their hand the ability to find out. So they find out what's available, what will work in our area, what will last in our weather. They start raising money for it. They did not elect officers. They did not form an organization. They're not a 501c3 at the time. They were in existence and raising money and making change for 3 years before they elected officers, and they only did that because the city told them they had to if they wanted to do anything in the city park, so they did. Now they have a president so that they can fulfill their requirement. But look, we now have fun equipment that's even safe for big kids to play on, because they just got together and did it. We don't need formality anymore. There's no one telling you no, just go do these things. Just take the action. And you can see what this has done to our work. So many more of us are now location independent. We're able to do our work from anywhere, or we're able to accomplish a lot more than we did before. And even if you run a very traditional hands-on kind of business, you have the ability to outsource so much of the technical work, the office and support work, the payroll, income taxes, accounting, all of the back-end HR. What else could that? Marketing could be outsourced. Everything that doesn't involve actually swinging the hammer could be completely outsourced and done by anybody anywhere. It didn't even have to be somebody local, but it can be. And that ability to separate work from place means that people can live anywhere they want, and that we don't have to limit our business just because we're located here. We can do anything that we want. An example of somebody that's doing that, now sometimes people tell me we don't have any of that in our town. This is my friend Grant Griffiths. He lives in Clay Center, Kansas. That's a town of 4,000 people, 4,500. In his basement, he is running Headway Themes, which is a internationally known WordPress theme company, which means they help people design websites. They are based out of his basement. He's been there for 8 years. He said there's almost nobody locally has any idea what he does for a living. Because why would they? They don't necessarily buy from him. He sells to people all over the world. In fact, most of his team is based independently in other small towns. The only other person in his company that worked in his same town was his son, because he lived in the house. He went away to college, and so that diversified even further. Now he's the only person working at headquarters, which is his basement. And there's people doing that in your town right now, and you just don't know about them. But they will all be down at co-working once Kat gets that going. So the cost of moving people and information and goods is declining. It's going to lead to all kinds of new products that are going to change the way the world works. High-speed connectivity is going to become even more ubiquitous than it is now. And we're just going to decouple work from place, and it's going to trigger a huge shift in where people live. We'll talk about some more of that. I want to go quickly through retail. We've got some retail folks here. Everything gigantic in American retail is going to get smaller or die. And that is a quote from James Kunstler, who was writing in Business Insider, and he said that in 2013, when everybody laughed at him when he said it. Last week, Ad Age reported that the scale implosion has happened. That predicted implosion of giant retail is going on right now. We're watching it as huge retail is just collapsing in on itself. This is their potential solution for big box retail, large retail. They've built a pretend downtown. That's what it's trying to be. It's called a lifestyle center. What is it? It's a small town. It's an outdoor shopping mall that's trying to pretend to be a downtown. Do you know anybody that has a downtown already? Like downtown has a downtown? Like Tonkawa has a downtown? Like lots of small towns have downtown. We already have what the big boxes are using as their potential solution to try to save themselves. So actually, Best Buy calls the new trend community-oriented retail. You know who's good at community-oriented retail? Community-oriented retailers, like our small town stores, are good at that kind of stuff. So I think this is hilarious, which is really not very nice of me, but I do think it's hilarious. The retail is just going to split in two, because all those salespeople aren't going to quit spending money. They got to spend money somewhere, so it's going to split in two. Stuff you do not care about, stuff that can be just automatic, is just going to happen. Like that order is going to go online. You won't even think about it. Like your refrigerator is going to call in and order more cheese, and it's going to get delivered by a drone. Your robot's going to go out, pick it up, put it in the fridge. Like you won't even be involved in that transaction until you go, oh, cheese. Like that's going to be your role in it. So all of those purchases are just going to happen without you thinking about it. And that's already here. Like Amazon has the dash buttons. You can just walk up and go, we're out of paper towels. Ordered. Done. Like that's what's going to happen to part of retail. That's the boring end of retail. The interesting end of retail goes to small stores, because if it's something we care about that we're interested in, if it's like Fiesta dishes and I want to go enjoy shopping for Fiesta dishes because they're so pretty and the display is going to be fun, and besides I got to go through the entire upscale flea market, tiny business village, and see all the stuff and the guy that's carving fishing lures, and that's an experience. So that's where I'm going to go get my Fiesta dishes. And that will be the split. Stuff we are interested in and care about goes to small retailers. Stuff we don't care about happened automatically. The robots did it. Now, IBM says in 5 years, buying local will beat buying online. And that is because they see local retailers adopting the technology that we're used to from online. The ability to give recommendations, subscriptions, things that come automatically, the ability to refer people to other merchants to be able to sell stuff in your store that's not actually in your store, but we'll get it for you, it'll show up at your house. But you can come down here and we have the expertise, we have the knowledge, and we have the technology tools to keep your wish list and know when your holidays are and what everybody needs. Connecting that kind of technology to your store is what IBM is talking about, going to make small stores ultra competitive in the next 5 years. Jack Ma, chairman of Alibaba, says that's how they're going to take that Chinese online retailer into the real world. They're not going to build their own stores. They're going to work with the hundreds and thousands of small stores that already exist. That's how they'll get into the physical retail game. So it's changing really fast. Now, I'm going to close with this one, which is small town cool. Because small towns are cool again. I think we've always been cool. Because that's where it's at. All the cool is in small towns. Turns out big city people like to visit small towns. They do, it's true, because we're awesome. And so Fodor's Travel says there's been a big uprise in travel to small towns, for people want a local, authentic, mom and pop experience. We got that covered, like we've got that. They said they're looking for towns with quirky and regional appeal. Quirky, we've got quirky. We can do quirky. So this is good news for us. When it said everybody wanted to go places that were big museums, and they wanted to check sites off a list, stuff that was in a guidebook, we couldn't quite do that. We're not in the guidebooks. But when the people start looking for stuff off the beaten path, their friends and neighbors' favorite hidden gems, we can do that. My whole town is a hidden gem from that perspective. So this is good news for travel to small towns. Condé Nast Traveler calls this the explorer mindset. People need to know, explore, and experiment. Small towns are perfect for that. It also turns out there's that nephew again. I told you I got to use all my nephew photos this time. Y'all, I'm not giving you their Twitter handles or Instagrams because I'm not having you tell them I did this. But people do like our way of life. We've seen this massive shift in lifestyle nationally where people are paying less attention to wealth and more attention to experience. Turns out money's not everything and bigger is not always better. So we're seeing that shift nationally. Adult coloring books because people are super stressed out and they need to relax. That's like an attempt to get into our small town relaxed way of life. So, I mean, for the yoga and massage group, this is speaking your language. That national trend also speaks to a small town lifestyle. And it does also extend to our downtown. There are huge trends in national urban planning of strong towns and smart growth and new urbanism and walkability and livability, and all of these things are really just about how can we make our big cities more like a small town. We already have that. Like, we don't have to go out and remake our town. We don't have to manufacture it exactly because we've got it. We just have to enhance what we're already working with. So this is also great news for small towns because we have this already. Now, this means that there's an increasing demand in people who would like to live in small towns. When Trulia ran a survey of where would people like to live, where do you want to live in just 5 years? Where do you see yourself living in 5 years? So this is how it breaks down. Urban is the bottom, suburban is the middle. Rural is the only area that gained in that survey. There's the number of people who live there now versus the number who want to live there in 5 years. Rural gained 7% of the population if people had where they'd like to live. important to know. You remember we said work and place are breaking apart. People are going to be able to live where they want. And in fact, we're seeing it happen right now. Everything that you've been told all your life is rural is dying, right? Like we're the bottom line headed for oblivion, right? You know who that line actually is? The densest counties in the United States. That's urban areas, urban cores. We, rural, the most rural counties, so that's the densest urban cores. The dark blue line at the top is like somewhere in the suburbs, close by the big city. And then the gray line is further out into like exurbs that are further away from the big city. And here's rural. Look at us holding our own and growing, actually, for the last 3 years, 4 years. That didn't make the news, did it? No, what are they still saying on the news? Rural is dying, all small towns will disappear. Oh, they forgot, actually. This is from Governing Magazine, who looked at the new census data. This is the number of people who moved into each county minus the number of people who moved out of each county, and they just broke it up. Most urban, most rural. There we are. So we know it's already happening. So which towns are going to survive? You remember I said that it's going to be those that are open to new ideas, that Iowa State University study. We have to be open to new ideas. We have to pay attention to what's coming in the future. That.
Hard to change people's attitude about those.
Oh man, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. And so I just want to say, this is one thing that helps with that. One is to talk about the future. How can you get people who are like, I remember when, how can you get them to turn to, here it comes, real fast. And talking about those future trends is like the number one club to beat people over the head with when you're trying to get them to think about the future. You go, hey, you know, Tesla cars drive themselves. The National Municipal League has just issued guidance for all cities and towns that they need to be adopting right now for autonomous vehicles. Have we done that? Now, when they go back to arguing about who's going to deal with the stop sign on the end of Ash Street, you know, then you go, hey, autonomous vehicles coming fast. Are we thinking about the future here? Are we, you know, that? So that's a good lever to help move people forward, is to talk about how things are changing into the future. The best trick I've found to get them to do that is to let them have that moment in the past. So on cars, we use this example. We say, what car were you driving 30 years ago? Somebody tell me what car you drove 30 years ago. I drove a 75 Mustang with an 8-track player. Who can top that? 76 Honda. Okay, so let's see. What did you have?
A black dually truck.
A black dually. All right. Okay. What other cars were you driving? It was in
69 Fairlane.
Oh God, the 69 Fairlane. You wish you had it back, don't you? All right.
72 Jeep.
The 72 Jeep. Oh my God. So 87. You guys weren't even born in 87. You guys are out of this conversation. You were born. It was a big wheel, tricycle, spare tire, working air conditioning, working seat belts, a DVD player,
Technology hookup.
power windows. You had zipper windows in the Jeep, man.
Oh, yeah.
Ladies, I'm glad you were here. Thank you so much.
Sorry, we have to go.
What else? Like anti-lock brakes. A lot of us probably drove here in a car that we don't know it, but it will power steering, automatic transmission, lane keeping technology is here. Somebody drove here in a car that's new enough that it keeps you in your lane and warns you when you're out.
Trip odometer.
Trip odometer. Okay. That's pretty basic, the trip odometer. What else? Cars will stop themselves right now if they detect an obstacle in your path.
They won't go into drive if you're not seatbelted, if the pressure's on the seat, but the seatbelt's not engaged.
It will keep you from driving.
Yeah. I was in a 2015, we were driving around the city, and once you're within the city limits, there's some kind of trigger.
Yeah, GPS, which, I mean, talk about things your car from 30 years ago didn't have that your car now has. GPS, it knows where you are. It knows what the speed limit is. We've delegated to it knowing where to turn. I had a rental car when I was in Wisconsin. Delegated to it was all control of the headlights. It knew what needed to be done with headlights, including bright and dim, which it was better about remembering to do that than I was. The windshield wipers, it takes care of that too. Like, we just keep delegating more and more stuff to the car. Is it really that big of a step to delegate the driving? Like we could order a car today that will drive itself. Now, 30 years from now, what will the car look like? It'll have wings. It better fly. It won't look like a car. It's going to have 4 blades. It's a quadcopter, and it'll just take you somewhere you need to go. You just can get in it and tell it, Oklahoma City, and it'll go, all right. 30 years from now. That is the best tool to change people from thinking about the past to thinking about the future that I have found so far. I'll keep you updated as I continue to work on this question. I really do work on this question. So, where are we? The time has passed when a few influential people could gather in a room and decide what the future of your town is. The future of a town today will be decided by the actions of hundreds of people taken every day based on their belief about the future of your town and their role in it. We are crowdsourcing the future of our towns. You remember we said you don't need organization anymore, you don't need formality, you don't need permission, you can just do things because you have access to all this information. That applies to the whole of your town. Everything that you do, everything that you believe about your town is what makes it happen. That's where the future of your town is coming from. It's from you and not just some officials sitting in a room somewhere who've decided on a plan. They're still deciding on that plan. It just doesn't matter because you guys are doing it. So the question to ask people to really get them off high center is, how will inaction cost us in a year from now if we don't do anything? You remember, if we just sit here, we're going to get run over. We're not comparing the risk of change and how hard things would be if we changed, what will it look like if we change, versus it's really great, we're going to stick with it. We have to compare that risk of change versus how things will change around us if we don't move. How will our inaction cost us in a year? So that's another great tool to help keep people changing. So I want to say thank you for coming to this. I'm going to wrap up here. But I'm going to hang around for the next 10 minutes, and I want to talk to you. So if you have questions or something you want to ask me, do hang around. This will get you a copy of those trends I just talked about so quickly. If you need a bludgeon to use to just kind of gently nudge some people into thinking about the future, those trends will help you do that. If you're interested in the small town business stuff, I do write about doing business in a small town. That's at smallbizsurvival.com.
Yes, and I will do a plug here. If you can get on this weekly, she sends out the brag basket, she sends out information, small business, owning your own business, things that she finds in other communities, in other states, in other countries.
Yes.
That are great. Oh, wow, how can we do that here? How can we scale that down to help your business, or how can we scale that down to help our town?
Yeah.
And I've gotten some great stuff, and I've used some great stories out of there when I'm talking to people.
Excellent, excellent.
I'm on that, and I can tell you that I talk to my trustees a lot about what I just learned in the webinar, what I just got off of your newsletter.
Excellent. Smallbizsurvival.com is the one that's about running your own business. And then Savior.town is about shaping the future of your town as a whole, because it's us that does that. We're the ones who do it. Not those officials or people that got elected or hold a title. It's us. We're the ones who decide what our town's going to be like.
Absolutely.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Couple of things. Come up and talk to Becky.